Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel and Escape from the City on the ABC. And Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of the 2018 Property Investment Advisory Firm of the Year.
Alright folks, you're on the Property Couch for each week. Ben and I bring you the insider's guide to property finance and money management. Hello Ben!
G'day mate, how are you going?
Good, thank you. We're excited about
Wow, footy, on our business end, right, tonight,
Yep.
First game.
all happens.
All happens.
So here's what we're going to do, Ben. For those, a few of our listeners are going to love this bit. That's the last bit we're going to talk about footy. We're going to, because our tipping comp's going to stay a little bit clandestine.
Yep.
Right up until the announcement of the winner after the grand final. So that's exciting.
Only if I can control myself.
Well, we're going to try for at least a couple of weeks
Yeah.
just to, no footy banner, so we'll see how we go. So, but Ben, a couple of things
That's
before
probably
we...
the Pies might go out straight set, so I won't talk about footy. Come on, Pies, you can do it.
We've got an exciting guest today to talk to, Ben, so I want to really get into that shortly because it's there's a lot of really good content. But before we do, a couple of things. Pippa sentiment survey.
Yes.
Tomorrow's the last day.
Last
Ben.
day closes tomorrow, so if you haven't already filled out the survey, please do it tonight or Friday, the last day, so we can get those in. Look, I think it'll probably be between you and me and the fence post, Bros. It might sneak into the weekend, but that's it, right? Get it done. Get it done.
Do it while
if you can. I've done mine. Have you done yours yet?
Yep, 9 times.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. I did it as soon as it came through. Made sense just to get it done and move on. So.
Beautiful.
Please participate in that. Hey folks, last couple of weeks we did some demographic podcasts around some 101s and groupings and all that sort of stuff. Ibis has put together some really great free reports.
Yep.
Downloadable, consume at your leisure, show notes, Facebook, all that sort of stuff. So go and check that out. Ben, as you do every other month,
Yep.
you've done an RBA announcement.
RBA announcement's out, so check that out.
These are just getting better
Little
and better,
bonus
mate.
episode.
Not only do you give the commentary around interest rates, Ben, but you also go on economy. You have a look over.
It's bouncy, mate.
Have a look overseas.
There's a little bit of noise out there, right? So we've got to separate the facts from the fiction.
And coming up on our 250th, Ben, we've got someone who would love to talk about that
Huge
particular
guest, Bryce.
topic.
Promise you a huge guest. Got a huge guest.
So we've got this huge guest coming up, Ben, and
do.
we're going to give away some gifts.
We do. We've got some amazing little surprises for our 250th, including a mega guest. So looking forward to that one.
Yep. So well worth hanging around with us, folks. And
and just before we move on to your Mindset Minute, Bryce, Pete Wargent, webinar done. So that was last week, but it's for all of the members. It's available on the Picker website. So if you pay for your membership, that's going to be an evergreen webinar there that you can take and have a listen to and continue your education journey with one of the sharpest minds in property.
Pete Wargent is a very sharp mind, mate. So for $5 to get access to that fair income, folks.
So, and thanks for those people who turned up and some of the great questions we got on the night. So I appreciate that from all those who turned up.
Well done, mate. My Mindset Minute today is courtesy of one of our buyers agents here, Jake Milne.
Oh, okay.
Sent this to me, Ben. It's
Jake.
It's a story of the $20 at a Harvard MBA. So Professor Max Basman always starts the first day of his Harvard MBA class the same way I was. He holds up a $20 bill and offers it up to auction for the class, Ben. He has 2 rules for the auction. Number 1, bids must be made in $1 increments for that $20 bill, Ibis. So if you want the $20 bill, you can bid in increments of $1. Rule number 2, Ben. And if you miss this rule, you will miss the entire Mindset Minute, okay? So dial in, folks, if you're distracted right now. Rule number 2, the runner-up must honour their bid, meaning that although the winner will take the $20 bill, Ibis, the second place finisher too must pay the last bid he or she made, but receive nothing in return. So it's strategic, right? Everyone got that? Landed?
Yep.
Okay.
I've been involved in this before, so I know what's going on here.
What Professor Basman is doing here is teaching his Harvard MBA students how to negotiate, Ibis. The pattern is always the same, he explains. The bidding starts out fast and furious until it reaches the $12 to $16 range, Ben. Because if I bid $16, the person who bid $15 still has to pay, Ben. So that's where it gets a bit messy. Now this is the point when those with weaker wills start to drop out. Meanwhile, like moths to a candle, the last 2 students get locked in. But now, I would have been worried about you and me because we probably would have gone to $1 million just to be the winner of the $20. But here we go. One bidder has bid $16 and the other $17. The $16 bidder now must bid $18 or suffer a $16 loss. Neither student wants to be the fool who paid good money for nothing. This is when students start to exhibit the same behaviour as many people trying to buy or sell a home, if you're wondering where the link is, Ivis, okay? They became committed to a strategy that is not geared towards winning, but rather towards trying not to lose. In behavioural economics, this is called loss aversion, which refers to the strong tendency of people to avoid loss rather than the acquisition of gain or acquiring gain. A very powerful motivational force. Some studies have shown that the perception of loss is psychologically 50% more powerful than perceived gain. Combine this loss aversion with cognitive dissonance, which isn't easy to say, the tendency of people to reject evidence that is contradictory to a belief, and the effect on the bottom line can be devastatingly costly, Ben. So in Basman's Harvard MBA class, students will continue bidding $21, $22, $50, Ivis, $100. Remember, the bounty is only for a $20 bill. Up to a record of $204.
Wow.
Indeed, in all the years Basman has been teaching, he has never lost a penny of that $20 bill. But he does donate all the proceeds to charity. Oh, that we all had attended Basman's class on negotiating in real life and specifically real estate. I've seen people waste thousands of dollars and incur incalculable anguish, frustration and heartache for fear of losing the best terms. Sellers may reject multiple offers or refuse to reduce their list price, all in the while ignorant of the carrying costs of the property. Buyers, on the other hand, might endure months of excruciating commutes or marital stress rather than pay a penny more than they think the property is worth. Now, that's a point I want to highlight, Ben, because I see that so often with our team,
100%.
where they're saying to people, but if you give us an extra $7,000, we'll give you next weekend back, and it's not going to be cheaper next weekend. So that's part of the discussion that we're having. Conversely, sellers might accept a lower offer than necessary, and buyers might overpay for a perceived dream house while ignoring alternative principles. Now, hang in there, I'm almost finished, Thomas. How can one avoid making costly, seemingly illogical decisions? I recommend that before entering into any important negotiation like a real estate transaction, you should have a very clear idea of the costs, both financial and emotional, that you will incur if you do not reach an agreement. Professional negotiators call this your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, in brackets a BATNA. By investing a small amount of time and energy in understanding your BATNA, you can better access your reservation price or the point above or below which you will not go in a negotiation. If Professor Basman's students all took the time to understand their BATNA, the cost of that $20 bill would never exceed a few dollars. Similarly, albeit on a much grander scale, if you understand your BATNA in your next real estate transaction, you will avoid making decisions that are contrary to your long-term best interest, Ben.
Bryce, I've seen that demonstrated on a couple of occasions. There's also a National Geographic show, I think it's called Brain Games, and they do the same sort of thing in a pub with a $20 note, and the same thing, I think they got up to $48 or something like that, and it's two egos going at it. And it highlights to me the irrational behaviours that are experienced. Now, professionals get it, right? Because they've studied it, they're doing it week in, week out, it makes perfect sense to me. But the person who's buying one house every 7 to 10 years and they're playing with their hearts, not their heads, irrational behaviour is a real thing inside these types of live environments, right? Auction, perfect example of live environment. You've got to, what happens in this case is, and that's why dummy bids and, not dummy bids, but knockout bids and all that type of thing play a role in these negotiations, because what you're trying to do is snap them out of their irrational mind into their rational mind and say, hang about here, how am I doing this?
So that just also highlights the power of using a professional who actually understands what's going on here, so that they know, like a buyer's agent knows the BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So that is why, because at the end of the day, you're having one title move from one person's name to another in a real estate transaction. what it is actually not that difficult, right?
Yeah.
But all the nuances and the mindset that gets in the way.
And do you, I mean, in terms of me, I have, a great price that you'll get it for, and then what's your stretch, right? And that has to be set in stone. Before you walk up there, then your mind should hopefully stay in a rational state as opposed to moving into an irrational state.
We set 3 prices, Ben.
Yep.
The price that we wouldn't, that would be great to pick it up under very minimal competition.
Yep.
The second price is the price that we will pay with expected competition. And then the third price is what's the stretch point that takes into account everything that the professor was talking about here, not only the financial cost, but the emotional cost that comes from it, and also the fact that if you miss it this week, doesn't mean it's cheaper next week. In fact, it means it's harder to find next week, and you're probably going to pay more.
That's the conditioning, isn't it? In regards to, trying to people to understand that the very first property you look at could be an absolute beauty, and then the property after that may not be as good as that, and you're forever chasing your tail, but you weren't emotionally there yet because you hadn't gone on a journey. You haven't had that lived experience.
Well, and the buyer's agent, particularly our team, we've got a large team, so we're seeing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of properties
every week.
Forming a mental database that's collectively collaborated against, so that we can actually, so we know what the BATNA is, right?
Correct.
Usually within an instant, but all right, Ben.
Nice one, mate. Good job. I think that is a great mindset minute, Bryce. Even though I went for 5, I think it's a great 5 minutes spent on building knowledge.
So do you see how that worked, guys? Compliment, sideswipe. That's just to balance it up so we can save. But thank you, Ben. I appreciate your feedback on that. Hey, look, we've got a very special guest today.
We do.
Her name is Hayley Mitchell. She has a property management business in Geelong. For those people not in Victoria, that is almost an outer suburb of Melbourne, but is technically regional Melbourne. And she's also passionate about training people. So first of all, welcome to the Property Couch, Hayley.
Yep.
Ben, I asked Hayley to come and join us on the couch because recently she came into the office and spoke to our team about the legislation changes that are planned for here in Victoria. And it was very, very insightful. And I thought, there's a really good opportunity here to share it with the Property Couch audience, because not only is it relevant to Victoria, but the mooted sort of...
Yeah, the legislation's carrying, right?
Yeah.
We've mentioned it only recently about WA are going through this process. Everyone's going to go there. So to bring a subject matter expert in who's been a property manager for an extended period of time means we go straight to the source.
Yeah.
We get all the gold. And I tell you what, the little running sheet that we've got in front of us, if there is a lot of changes. What was it? 138 changes.
Correct.
Now, Hayley, you've gone through and poured through all these changes and summarised it as been mentioned there. And we're going to make this available to our listeners. So in the show notes, you can click on see all of your hard work. But come on, how long did it take you to read all the changes?
It was 2 weeks. So I sat at home and I cross-referenced the current legislation against what is proposed in the bill, and then went through all the CAV reforms as well. So 2 whole weeks of sitting down, reading the nearly 500-page document.
Oh, I don't reckon, Ben, that there would have been... I'll throw it out there. Surely there's only less than a handful of people who've done that.
I've met one other person.
Yeah, there's a couple going around, but I think, look, the lawyers were going to go through it, right? Because all this is ultimately going to be tested at some point in time. And this, as what we were saying, and we were saying it last year when we spoke to Yvonne around, this is major reform.
Yep.
We cannot make it any clearer to our listeners that this reform is significant, and it does have serious ramifications for anyone who owns property in Victoria, who is going to let their property out, as well as obviously the follow through that's gone into New South Wales. Queensland is going through that process. Western Australia are going to get there. So what we're talking about has implications right across Australia. If you're a property investor, you're a landlord, you have legal responsibilities, important responsibilities. So I'm really thrilled that, we're going to get a little bit technical, but we're going to go through this to just highlight some of the changes that are going to be made in our legislation, because it's passed. This is going to be law once they work out how to implement some of these crazy ideas that they've got. But anyway, we'll get back to that.
We might point out here for Hayley's benefit that she spent 2 weeks cross-referencing everything, but she's not suggesting anything here doesn't require you to go and get legal opinion. So this is just her express opinion. But I would say, been very well informed opinion.
Yeah,
so
yeah. And
this is putting that disclaimer in there for
Thank
Hayley's
you.
benefit, but it's a very good guide.
And Hayley, off the top, what do you recommend that most landlords do? Is it to go and talk to their property managers and get their insights in this area, and or are we expected that property managers are going to be proactive and start informing their landlords?
I think a lot of property managers are starting to really look at it. However, I manage a group of property managers on Facebook, and there's over 10,000. And a couple of people put up posts there going, we're not even going to worry about it till it comes in. And for me, I would rather know exactly what's coming so I can actually inform my clients. Because if a client calls them and says, hey, what's happening with this? You can't turn around and go, oh, don't worry about it till next year. It's not going to really matter.
So that's
it's going to have a
message.
massive impact.
Don't rely on your property manager to be proactive coming to you. It sounds like, as a landlord, you're going to have to go over to your property manager and just get a heads up in terms of where they're at with the legislation. And also, some of the information that we'll put in the show notes today as well.
And the other thing is, you can hop onto Consumer Affairs Victoria on Facebook, and anything that they have coming through, they'll post on there all the time. So that's where you can stay on top of the updates as they come through.
We'll give you that link.
We'll give that link for him shortly. Hey, just before we get into the technical, let's set the scene here. So you've been involved in the property industry for how long? And I remember when you came in here, you said, I love property, I love property management, I love the legislation.
I do.
Help our listeners get a bit of a sense of your pathway to this point.
I've been in real estate 20 years, so I've been a property manager, I've owned my own business, I sold my rent roll a couple of years ago, and then I've started up a new rent roll in Geelong now. So I'm a director of that particular business, plus I've got my training events company as well. So
and you're a property investor?
And I am, yes. I've got several investment properties as well, so I kind of cover a lot of the areas, I think.
Both seats.
Why do you love property management?
It's always a challenge. I love the people. It's not about property. It's about the people. And I don't think I could sit in a role where I just sat down at a chair and that's all I did all day. Like this morning I was out at my business in Geelong and I went out and scanned a property. So I did a 3D tour and then I was back in the office. I did the banking, I did the emails. Like every day is different. So I think if you're someone that just likes to go to work and have a really regimented role and be able to follow it through every day, it's not for you because you get thrown curveballs all the time. But I love the challenge.
Nice.
Very good.
So let's kick this off. Ben has been sort of talking on behalf of Picker for some time about these changes. But what about these changes was the one that surprised you the most?
It's probably not one that anyone else would have picked up initially, but when we serve a notice to vacate on a tenant, there's one which we use, which is an end of fixed term tenancy. So for a tenancy of less than 6 months, it's 60 day. For a tenancy more than 6 months, it's 90 day notice to vacate. They've changed it, so they've restricted it to the initial lease term only. So what that will mean for property investors is if you have a tenant that's there for 12 months and then you re-sign them to a new fixed term lease, you can no longer use that notice to vacate to evict that tenant. So what I think that's going to do to marketplace where the government's tried to bring in safe, secure, long-term housing for tenants, or renters, I should say, is people will start vacating their tenants every 12 months because once you go past the initial lease term, it's going to be really hard to move them on. And I think that was probably one of the silliest ones that they've included. I don't know if you guys agree.
No, totally crazy. Great.
And the other thing is we're losing the 120-day no reason notice, which I fully expected we're going to lose that, but I thought we'd still have that 90-day as a get out of jail free card, and we don't. So it's going to be really hard to get tenants out unless there's a breach or owner wants to move in or sell the property or something like that.
All right. And I think we do need to... this is part of the state government's agenda. I mean, just have a look at the subtle changes that we're talking about here. So landlords or owners will not be called landlords or owners anymore.
No.
They'll be called residential rental providers. A recommended retail price. Just remember that.
I know.
RRP, right? Recommended retail price. Residential rental providers. And tenants will no longer be called tenants. They'll be called renters. Okay, which is interesting. The tenancy agreement will be called the residential rental agreement. So they are making these subtle changes in a move to effectively give more power to the tenant, which I'm going to keep calling them landlords.
Yeah,
so they can.
so do I.
We're learning during that part of years, man.
So that's all right. But I mean, at the end of the day, someone owns the asset, and I think that's being lost a little bit here. I'm a big believer, always have been, that sometimes laws need to be reformed. We need to keep it fair and reasonable. That pendulum that I always keep talking about, getting the balance right. I think the balance has gone a bit too far in the other direction. I definitely think there needed to be some reform, but we'll get into that as we go through.
All right, so let's tap into a couple of additions. Well, we'll go through them methodically, but urgent repairs. What sort of additions have been changed?
So the change there is air conditioning will become an urgent repair. So it doesn't mean that a landlord, our owner, needs to put it in. However, if it is in, it does become an urgent repair to fix. So no surprises there. I'm not surprised at that.
Stinking hot day.
The only hard part there is trying to get an electrician out at the drop of a hat in 40-degree weather. But anyway, we'll work with that one. The other change there is every property in Victoria is going to have rental minimum standards that they have to adhere to. And at the moment, CAV's given us a list of what they propose to be minimum standards. I don't think any of them are too onerous, but it's things like a functioning heater in the main living area, window furnishings in the main living area and bedrooms, or any room expected to be used as a bedroom, adequate hot and cold water in the kitchen, bathroom and laundry. The property has to be secure, so can't get in through external access. One of the ones there, sink, food preparation area, cooktop and oven. And the other one there that they've mentioned is a vermin-proof bin. And I just look at that and go, does that mean we have to make sure we've got council bins with lids, or does that mean we've got to make sure we go to Bunnings and get little bins for everyone's kitchen? I mean, they haven't really given us any more information. I don't think any of those are really onerous on an owner, but it's just got to make sure that we actually do adhere to those minimum standards after 1st of July 2020.
Looks like the fact you've got to have a heater in.
Yeah, I think that's good.
I mean, it's good for but it's something that people might get caught napping if they bought a property, put it out on the marketplace, and then it doesn't have a heater. Oops.
Yeah.
And what's the minimum standard for the heater?
Well, yeah, that's why I'm saying to people at the moment, keep it in the back of your mind, but don't install it yet, because we might get ratings that we need to adhere to as well, and you might put something in now that doesn't actually work through with the ratings. So
it's interesting. I mean, we had friends over. Jane's cousin has just recently moved to Melbourne in Yarraville, and they only have the split system heater in the main living area. They've got it ducted, but it blew up, and the landlord hasn't replaced it. So the house is very cold. The living room can potentially be warm, but it's quite difficult. Now, you know, if you go in there eyes wide open, which is what I was sort of saying before, and we've had this conversation before about slumlords. We don't want any landlord to be a slumlord, but what's happening here is, even if the conditions of a property are as seen as received, that's changing now.
Correct.
So no longer will you be able to present a property that might be in a rundown state and say, well, that's what it's priced for.
Correct.
It actually has to be in this minimum standard.
Yeah, and that was something that is actually in the Act now. So it was a Supreme Court case back in 2016. Shields versus Daliopoulos, and it set a precedent back in the VCAT Act regarding, you know, what an owner has to do regarding maintenance and repairs on properties. So, for example, your ducted heating system, it's now recommended that if it's not going to be fixed before you advertise it, you've got to actually remove it, including
all the ducts and everything.
So control panel on wall, because you actually can't contract it out of an act, out of a lease. So you couldn't say to a tenant, you know, I'm advertising this property, no ducted heating, it's not going to be repaired, I'm putting in the lease, because you can't contract a landlord duty out of the act. So anything that's not working has to be removed.
So our friend has the opportunity to fix it. Now that I'm in, even though it might have been priced accordingly.
That's right.
There we go.
Well, that's not a cheap exercise too. No. So for, you know, again, for the awareness, as you're talking about, for people as they're buying properties, they need to have some awareness around what impact this will have, because ducted heating is expensive and hard to get to and all those sorts of things. All right, so there's been some updated disclosures that need to be entered into before you go to the agreement. Yeah,
so some of these, I'll only pick out one because it's one that will affect people. If sometimes an owner decides to put the property on the rental market and also the sale market at the same time, or they might have signed an authority with a selling agent to sell the property in a month's time, or organise a contract of sale with a solicitor. If they have, then they do need to disclose that legally to a tenant before the tenant signs a lease. If they don't disclose it to a tenant and the tenant finds out that they've already organised contract of sale or signed an authority, they can give 14 days notice and break their lease.
So I'm assuming in some cases the landlord's in a position where it says, look, if I don't rent it out in a quick enough period, then you can sell it for me.
Yeah.
So in that particular case, it's sort of saying the copy or the information provided in the tenancy agreement should basically say, hey, this property is potentially going to be optioned for sale.
Correct.
Yeah, but if you take out the lease, then technically it'll be withdrawn from sale.
That's right.
All right, so the next change is a property must be advertised at a fixed rental amount.
Yeah, this one's interesting. It's got 2 points of penalty unit fines which could be associated to this one. So the first one is that an agent or owner must advertise property a fixed amount. So you can't say offers over 300 or 3 to 320 a week.
Yep.
The penalty unit fine on this one is 60 penalty units, and a penalty unit currently is $165.22. So it works out to just under $10,000 fine. The other part of this is around solicitation of rental bids as well. So you can't basically take a higher bid on a property. So if a tenant comes up to you and open, there's 5 people there and they love it, they come up and say, how can I get this property? You can't turn around and say, well, offer an extra $5 a week.
Yep.
However, if a tenant pops an extra $5 a week on the application, you can absolutely accept it, but you can't go back to the other applicants and tell them that you've got a higher offer, because you can't solicit or otherwise invite an offer of rent that is higher than the advertised amount.
Now that's interesting, isn't it?
And that's also $10,000 fine.
For both the agent or the landlord if they're selling their property or renting their property directly. So let's play that in a practical sense. So once tenants, renters understand this, they're still going to potentially put a blind offer in if they really want the property.
Yeah.
So they're not. So we're not stopping that from happening, because that's supply and demand. That's leaving an open marketplace perform as it should perform. But effectively, you cannot and will not disclose that. So each application is received on its merits, and it's basically information is locked tight down for
That's
that.
it.
Okay.
Yep. We just got to be really careful, because I think that's one where it'll be challenged pretty quick.
Yeah. I that'll be tested, I have no doubt. But I like the idea that effectively it's still an open market.
It is.
So there's going to be an education process from the tenant side as much as there is going to be an education process on the landlord side. Okay.
Yeah.
So if a property manager was seen to make a statement of fact to a tenant, say, oh, by the way, that's dancing with the devil, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Okay.
I'd probably say there would be some type of pamphlet
Yes.
that you would get checked by in Victoria, REIV or something like that you could say, here's an information pamphlet with the new laws changes.
Here's an example, if you were what you just said.
I think it only makes sense, right? Because again, 138 changes. We're not going to be going through every one of them today, and some of them are significant. So I think landlords or tenants, for that matter, should be going, oh, guess what? We can't do any bidding anymore. So if the advertised price is $380 a week rent, I'm just going to put $380. And then they're going to say, well, why didn't I get the property? I've been a great tenant. And it's like, well, because there was 5 other people that basically put an application in, and why wasn't mine accepted? Well, someone put $400. But they're not allowed to. Well, yes, they are. No one's told you. So it's this education piece, right?
So the next one is around maximum bond.
Yeah, so currently we can take a higher bond if the property is over $351 a week in rent. This is going to change to twice the median rent for Victoria, which currently stands at $760 a week. So if you have a rental amount that's more than $760 a week, you'll be able to take a higher bond on the property.
Okay.
And is there an upper limit above $760?
Doesn't say at the moment, but...
What's the norm for the better properties? Are they normally taking 2 months or 3 months?
Usually 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah.
The highest bond I ever took was 8 weeks, and it was a $4,000 a week property.
Fair enough. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was
Makes
a big
sense.
one.
Fair enough. All right, that sounds pretty clear. Next one is under section 44 regarding rental increases.
So that's in now. That came in on the 19th of June this year. So we can only increase the rent every 12-month period. So it used to be 6 monthly. Now every 12 months.
What's your observation of that? Good, bad, or
Fantastic.
indifferent?
Yeah. Rents really don't fluctuate that quickly anyway. And as property managers, we didn't want to review the rents every 6 months and go, we can't do anything.
Yep.
So a lot of ours were set to annual anyway. So I don't think that's a big disruption at all. I think it's good for all parties.
All right. Next one, section 63, keep and leave premises reasonably clean.
Yeah, so the current legislation just says keep.
Yeah.
With reasonably clean, I think it's really important that landlords are aware that there's different standards for reasonably clean.
Yeah, reasonable person test.
Yeah, so, but I
Grey.
went to VCAP recently for cleaning on a property, and the VCAP member actually said to the person before me, because we can sit and hear other cases, that looks reasonable to me, a few cobwebs, and the fact that it wasn't shiny, that it had, you could tell white marks and that sort of thing, and some scuffs on walls is reasonably clean for a tenant, and that it's VCAP's expectation that a landlord should bring it up to reasonable clean for reletting, which means that an owner is expected to put their hand in their pocket to bring it up to an okay state for the landlord. For a new tenant to move into, sorry. So a lot of landlords don't understand that. And if we ever have to go to VCAP for cleaning, we get told by the VCAP members that all they expect is a Saturday morning wipe down. So an owner is expected to put their hand in their pocket to bring it up to a reasonable standard for a tenant to move into.
Once they depart. So
Yeah,
I
it's
noticed you were
tricky.
mentioning before, Hayley, about going and doing a 360. Sort of. We've had the guys on from Foria recently, and
They're great. That's what we use.
So you use that tool, great. So we're getting high resolution images and 3D images of the properties.
Yeah.
Are basically you saying if I've got a almost brand new, sparkling clean property, that the expectation now is that the landlords will have to do the commercial clean or the spruce up clean in addition to what the tenant's done?
Well, that's if it goes to VCAP, isn't it?
Yeah, potentially. So all a tenant is expected to do when they vacate is a Saturday morning wipe down.
Right, so even the oven, which could be caked on, baked on for 2 or 3 years, there's no expectation for them to be able to do. Can you write that into your agreement, or?
Well, that goes back to prohibited
Overriding
terms.
act, yeah.
So
Is that a prohibited term now?
it will be when the new Act comes into play. They're talking about cleaning's only going to be required if it's been required throughout the term of a tenancy. It's CAV's got, I think it's reform number 22, where they talk about this. It's really tricky. Cleaning's always been that really hard one to get at VCAP.
Because we're going to pass the costs on. So the rent will increase.
I truly believe rents are going to go up because of these changes.
I was just making a note of that in terms of when we were going to summarise what we've just learnt today. I'm like, there is no doubt that all of this carries a cost.
Absolutely.
And the cost is more than likely going to be shared between the landlord and the tenant. So I would expect rents to go up, and even if it's every 12 months, that sort of makes sense to me. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a compliance measure. And when compliance measures do come into play, expect to pay higher rents.
That's
Pretty
right.
simple.
And I think that with the whole cleaning thing on rental premises, it's we're actually going to get CAV guidelines around what they say is reasonably clean, what they say is fair wear and tear, what they say is endangerment and maintenance and repairs. So they're going to give us guidelines around all these grey areas that we currently work with under the Act. I just know from going to VCAT, if I'm going for cleaning, it's a really hard task to get what you're after.
And CAV's Consumer Affairs Victoria.
Yes.
Just making sure.
Well, I was about to say, just a reminder for our listeners who aren't in Victoria, that VCAT is the Victorian Civil
And
Administration Tribunal. CAV is the Consumer Affairs of Victoria. So, and the point of this, if you aren't living in Victoria, it's very, very helpful for you to know what might be coming down the road, Ben.
It's timely to start having a look at some of these changes. New South Wales is through. They didn't get the 90-day no reason clause, right? So they won that. And that was the big thing in New South Wales. So the Liberal Party got in, Labor got in here, Greens, voters, blah, 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 renters, whatever that looks like for people living in a city. That's the strongest voice. That's where the political tensions are. And so the Liberal Party were able to, they got in, but they did do some reasonable reform. They've got an interesting one in theirs about domestic violence.
Yes.
So it's the landlord's responsibility to cover the cost under domestic violence. So if someone, which again, horror situation, that someone has to go and report to a police officer that they've had a domestic violence incident and they can get out of their lease. Now, I know it's obviously going to happen, and that's an indictment on society in terms of that. But what about the ones who are just playing the game?
Yes.
How do I get out of my lease? Oh, I'm scared. He's going to hurt me. We're going to have all these false claims. So, again, nothing's ever easy or perfect, but these are the sort of unintended consequences
That's it.
that we have from this sort of change.
Now, Ben, you're standing up for this one. You might want to sit down. This might fire you up. Section 64, modifications to rented premises, because you fired up in the past.
Well, I have fired up in the past because, I mean, now that I've got an elephant in my backyard of a tenant, we just need to understand, it's a, modifications. What does that mean? I mean, am I going to concrete the backyard because it's easy to clean the elephant poo down in the backyard? Just hose it down as opposed to sweep. We just need information behind these, don't we?
I think the problem with the modifications, and to be honest, I don't know whether to be worried about it or not, because we actually don't know what the prescribed list is. So until we get that, we really don't know how they're going to interpret it. But a tenant renter will be able to make prescribed modifications without the landlord's consent. So we won't know about it, you guys won't, no one will know about it till we go there and do a routine and go, oh really, we've got 15 picture hooks on that wall, or we've got a new TV bracket, or we've got new shelving units. But we don't know what we're going to be given. The other part of this is anything other than that, a tenant does have to get written permission to do it. A landlord must not unreasonably withhold consent to giving of permission. There's a few different areas where they could, if there was a change of use of the property, or they were going to move into the property or something like that. But it then goes into the fact that if a tenant does want to make modifications to property that are not prescribed, we can actually take a top-up bond, which we actually don't have at our disposal at the moment. So all of a sudden I'm kind of not hating the modifications for the fact that we can actually take a top-up bond equivalent to the restoration at the end of a tenancy. So if a tenant says, I want to pop up an air conditioner, the owner might say, well, I don't want you to leave it there because it's going to be increased maintenance costs me in the future. So yes, you can put it up, but I require you to remove it and restore the premises at the end. That would cost $1,000. So give me $1,000. I'll top it up with the RTBA, and at the end, if you don't restore it, I'll use that money to do so.
There's a bit of common sense coming in.
However, I don't know whether we're going to have to go to VCAT to get that part of the bond.
Yeah, that sounds crazy.
In which case, an owner might go, well, if I've got to go to VCAT to get it, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a cost.
Yeah,
of which
exactly.
is probably the same sort of cost to higher rents. If I
That's
have to
right.
go, so if you're listening, regulators, don't make us go to VCAT because we'll just pass on the cost.
Exactly.
Right? Let us organise it through our licensed professional property managers, and you'll see it being done. And then I think it's got the right balance. I definitely like that in terms of being able to raise for restoration works.
You've been doing this for a long time. What are your observations, or where you think that's, if that happened, reasonable, makes no problem for you, and then where's the point of tipping over the edge for you?
I don't have a huge issue with it because most renters don't want to put money into a property. I've probably I used to have a property I managed where a tenant wanted to put in aircon and the owner went half-half. Had a few tenants that in the past that have wanted to put up new curtains or little things like that. I did have a tenant put in a new kitchen once without permission, but anyway.
A new kitchen?
Yeah, that was good. But it was actually good because the owner got a free kitchen out of it.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It was brand new cabinets and everything. It was actually really great. Except at the end of a tenancy when the tenant called and said, I've just got to work out costs for the kitchen. And I said, no, you signed off on it 2 years ago, remember? And I found the bit of paper and sent it to him and he goes, I just thought I'd see if,
There it is.
Lucky I've got my documentation intact.
Yeah. I'd expect no less from you. Yeah.
But it was really funny. So if you look at it and you go modifications, and I mean, if I say a tenant can paint a house black, I'm concerned, so it depends on what we get with that list.
Yeah. All right, Section 65, duty in relation to the premises.
Yes, so this is another one. This has got currently 0 penalty unit fine, and it's going up to 60 penalty unit fine, which is just under that $10,000 mark. So basically it's a landlord's duty to make sure that on the day it's agreed that the tenant takes occupation of the property, that the property is reasonably clean, going back to the reasonably clean scenario, and vacant. So I was at a VCAT forum years ago, and they might have changed their stance on it now, but the member actually at the time that was doing the training for the VCAP forum actually said, it is our recommendation not to lease out a property prior to a current tenant vacating, because you may breach this duty, which is a landlord's duty to make sure the property is handed over reasonably clean and vacant. Because if your current tenant doesn't move out or returns it in disgusting condition, you don't have time to get cleaners, then you've breached the landlord's duty. No one really worried about that because there was no penalty unit fine. but going up to $10,000 or
Yeah, a lot of
60
people
penalty
are worried.
units, some people will be worried. So my recommendation is just make sure you've got enough wiggle room between tenancies and have cleaners on standby so that you can get them in at a drop of a hat so you can get it ready for new tenants. But it's slightly concerning, that one.
And it's also going to show that, you're not going to say this, well, you may, but showing the value of having not only a property manager versus doing it yourself, but also a professional property manager who's connected with the right people who can make things happen quickly enough and knows the nuances of the legislation, because you could get caught out if you're paying peanuts and your property manager leaves that.
You look concerned.
Well, no, you just want humans to act like real humans, right?
Yeah.
Where if you're selling a property or buying a property or renting a property or moving out of a rental, just have some decency.
Do as you would be done by.
Correct.
Yeah.
And just clean it and make it presentable as you would want your place to be presentable. Exactly right, Bryce. It does annoy me that people look at these types of things and they take advantage of these types of clauses around reasonably clean. I mean, we go to VCAT, we get, the landlord goes to VCAT and they say, oh, well, that's reasonably clean. Great, well, I'm going to leave it in exactly the same condition when the next person comes in, and you've told me it's reasonably clean, whereas I would have done a nice, big, beautiful clean for that. And it just creates poor behaviour, all right? People take advantage of these types of clauses and it just annoys me.
Yeah, no, you should speak up more about it, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Join an association called Figure.
Section 68 talks about a flow on about the duty to maintain premises.
Yeah, so regardless of the amount of rent being paid, the character and nature of rented premises, and even if a tenant was aware of a disrepair before signing up for the tenancy, they can basically move into your property at $250 a week, say, for example, and pay that $250 a week and then serve you with a massive repair bill notice, and you've got to do a certain amount of repairs, and then they're still signed up at $250 a week. So they could be fully aware that at start of tenancy, the blinds weren't great, the kitchen cupboards didn't shut properly, the tiles were coming loose in the bathroom, like a whole range of stuff, ducted heating units not working and wouldn't be fixed. And, you're not going to fix it because you didn't want to demolish the property in 12 months' time. And the tenant's like,
beware property developers,
correct,
that one.
Yeah.
This is a big one. So what this is going to do, it's going to stop property developers putting their properties on the market for those short periods of time while they're waiting for plans and permits, or they'll put the properties up, but they'll do work to them beforehand and get a high rental, because you can rent it out and they're stuck there on the $250 a week for 12 months, and you've got to spend 20 grand bringing it up to a reasonable standard. That one's tricky.
So I can see this playing out. So let's run a hypothetical, right? So a professional tenant, who knows all the legislation. So they find an inner city area that they like the convenience, the proximity of it. The property is an established home. It's probably 30 or 40 years old. It might have had its last renovation in the 80s, so it's still got a functioning kitchen, but not grand or anything like that. Cupboards still closed, comfortable, but they might be rubbing a little bit, as you say, the curtains. So all of a sudden, this professional tenant walks in and basically has a demand of 30 things that they want fixed, which is going to cost the landlord around $5,000 to $10,000. What is this is the first lease, so they've just moved in. What actions can they have instead of, have I got a professional tenant who's going to game me for this entire program? What have they got available to them under this new legislation?
If a tenant served a repair notice and then went to VCAT because you didn't do the repairs, VCAT can then decide whether they order the owner to do the repairs, use a suitably qualified person, and even pay compensation to the tenant under Section 212, which that's a brand new section under that. So if that happens, you have to do it.
Yep. And then in terms of the 90-day no notice period, how would that play out given it's the first
end of fixed term?
And it's in the first period, not necessarily their first fixed term period. They could still enforce that?
Yeah, so you could do the 90-day end of fixed term, coinciding with the end of lease date, or it does say slightly after, it could be anyway, but we'll see how that one plays out. That's what you could do. Just be aware that any notice that you serve on a tenant to vacate under new legislation, the tenant can give you 14-day return notice, irrespective of end of lease date.
Yep.
All right, we've got a bit to get through here, Ben. So Section 71, renter may keep a pet.
All right, this is fun. Okay.
That's my elephant. In the brand new, I took all the grass out, put the concrete in, because it's just a little bit easier to scoop
I have
it.
seen,
And I'm okay to have my elephant in the backyard on my concrete because it's non-structural.
Yeah.
And I'm allowed to have a pet, and I just want to have an elephant. Might be a miniature elephant. I still want an elephant though. Got a permit.
So the Act is currently silent on pets. So the only way we can do anything about pets now is if they're causing damage, a nuisance, or endangering the safety of a neighbour. Right. So tenant can apply for a
the
property.
elephant might be causing an
Yeah,
issue.
the elephant might be an issue there.
Reverse the car out.
No.
So
That big
basically,
honking, trumpeting sound that you get.
tenant moves into the property, they have no pets.
Yeah.
They apply for property, no pets.
Yeah.
And then the owner drives past and sees a little cat in the front window. If the cat's not causing damage nuisance, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it.
Yep.
So under the new legislation, actually puts the onus back on the tenant for doing the right thing. So the tenant will need to apply for the pet. First of all, a tenant can only keep the pet in the property with the written permission of the landlord or a VCAT order saying yes to the pet. The tenant must apply to have the pet in a form approved by the Director of Consumer Affairs Victoria. So basically a pet application form.
Yep.
The tenant fills out the pet application form, hands it to the agent. The agent then has 14 days to respond to that. If they don't respond to it within 14 days, it's assumed consent. So it's automatic consent. So if you ignore it and think it's going to go away, or the owner's overseas for a month, you can't contact them, that 14 days has lapsed, it's consent. The other part here, in order to say no to that pet, you need to apply to VCAT to say no to that pet within 14 days.
Okay. Now, so
And that's just lodging your,
VCAT application.
We're arguing whether an elephant is a reasonable
No,
pet or not.
look, that was an example that it's not possible. You can't have an elephant
No, you
in,
can't
in
have
your
an
backyard.
elephant.
But you
You
can
want to
have
have it in your own, though.
You can have a Doberman on new polished floorboards with unclipped paws or whatever it may look like, and they can destroy floorboards just in their weights and movement around that particular property.
So VCAT will decide whether or not the tenant's allowed to keep a pet,
Yep.
or whether the pet gets excluded. So it doesn't cancel a tenancy, it excludes the pet from the tenancy. The other part of it, if we think the tenant is keeping a sneaky pet, so we go into a routine inspection, we're like, oh, there's so animals in here, they're probably locked in the back seat of the car, while we go through and do our routines, which does happen. But if we think they're keeping a sneaky pet, we can also apply to VCAT to remove that pet, which at the moment we can't do anything about it. But you've got to have evidence, obviously. So VCAT will look at, the character of the property, the quality for fixtures and fittings, whether that particular pet is suitable for that space. They'll either look at things like whether there's any, I can't remember how they call it, but whether it's like a tenant requires that pet for medical reasons.
Yes.
So anxiety,
Caring
pets and those sort of
I
things.
like that story. I think that's great.
And then VCAT will basically say the pet can stay or the pet has to go. If they give you an order excluding the pet from the premises, they'll give a date in which the pet has to be removed. If the pet's not removed by that said date and 14 days has passed since the order has taken effect, it's a 28-day notice to vacate on the tenant.
So as long as there's also the clause in there that says they lied, they didn't have it, because what they're going to do is say, yeah, you're right, I didn't tell you because I didn't think you'd lied, but we're now going to apply.
Yeah.
And then VCAT says, well, look, they've come clean. It's like, it's the spirit of what else are you going to do? I'm not going to trust you as my tenant in that particular property anymore. So
the other thing is, if they had have said, yes, okay, the pet's allowed, but there is an extra bond for a dog or an extra bond for a cat, I would have gone, okay, happy days. Because if we go back to the bond, maximum bond, anything over $760 a week is going to be a high bond rather than $351. So we got less bond and can't say no.
Greater wear and tear.
Yeah.
And greater damage. Oh, wait a minute, so I can't get it that way?
Yep.
Oh, you're going to have a pet? Well, I'm going to do a 12-month review and I'm going to factor that in to my, my repair.
The turnover.
Yeah, the replacement cost of all of the wear and tear, because it's accelerated with a dog running around catching a ball.
That's it.
Up and down the hallway.
Yep.
Section 72 talks about urgent repairs.
Yeah, urgent repairs. So we'll just go through this. So $1,000 limit has been removed, but it actually states $1,800 under a different section, so that's fine. We will need to reimburse tenants within 7 days of urgent repairs. So say a tenant calls the plumber on a Saturday night because the toilet's blocked. Plumber comes out, unblocks toilet, tenant pays him $500 cash. You'll need to reimburse tenant within 7 days. It's currently 14 days. That's it.
No cap on how much they can charge.
No.
So you
So
can
it's
see this-
$1,800
That's dangerous.
that they can spend.
That's dangerous.
Yeah.
That's dangerous.
So Bryce, you and me, we're mates, right? I'm
Yeah.
a plumber.
Yeah.
We want to go out for beers on Saturday night.
Yeah. Can you come around and fix my toilet?
Yeah, is your toilet blocked?
Yeah,
mate?
yeah.
I can. Well, let me give you an invoice for $500 to come and basically. Oh, yep. I just urge and repair all. Yep.
It's
I can
gonna
see
be
that. I can see that one being abused,
Yeah.
as usual. But I also see the tenant side on that one too.
Absolutely.
And that is if it is blocked up and there is a risk of health or wellness or whatever that may be, you do want prompt attention to that.
Absolutely.
But you want it to, you've got to get that balance right, and having this as the, I mean, if that is the case, I would like to see the property manager, which would have normally a relationship with the tradespeople, those tradespeople go out and it's all done through those right channels because
Correct.
they've got a credit set up.
Yep.
I would do this is I wouldn't allow them to have their own provider.
Yep.
So you've got to go through one of the registered providers from the property manager.
Yep.
Because you have that.
Yeah.
You have emergency
Exactly.
stuff in
Correct.
place.
Yeah, so I'm actually not concerned about that.
Aren't you? You
Only
think they'll game
because
it or
I've been the urgent contact for
Yep.
my agency, well, not currently, but my
Yeah, in
agency
the
for
past.
20 years.
Yeah.
And they call me and I decide what's urgent, what's not. And I reckon 99% of the time I can tell them I'll get it fixed on Monday, so there's no cost to tenant or landlord anyway. So I think it's for those agencies that don't have a good urgent repairs process in place. So ours basically says you have to call us and we decide.
Yeah, but
And
you
I-
can't.
But it's
supersede
open
the
for
act, though,
fraud,
can
right?
you?
No, but they never do. They just call us.
Yeah.
I just haven't had it happen.
until they gamify it, until they find, and that's what I'm saying. There's a
Yeah.
they,
Professional tenant has been
Yeah.
they
saying.
can
true.
gamify this. No worries at
Yeah.
all. They'll commit fraud if it's
Maybe
$500
I've
in their
just
back
had really
pocket.
good people.
All right, Section 85 talks
Yep.
about the entry of rented premises.
Yeah, totally changing this. So my recommendation to property managers at the moment is everyone get onto electronic service. So if we get onto electronic leases, then it means that our service, our requirement for postage comes right down. So entry of rented premises, it's going to be 48 hours notice for leasing and private inspections. So leasing, private and OFIs. So OFIs are actually going to be included in the Act, whereas at the moment the Act actually says prospective tenant. So technically, if we want to do an open for inspection, we're not covered under the Act. So that's an improvement. It's going to be minimum of 7 days notice for advertising photos and videos for sale properties, which is again fantastic. So we don't have anything that covers this at the moment. So if a tenant's reluctant to let us through, it's often hard to get the permission under the right section. And it's going to be same for landlord duty, tenant failed to comply, family violence, minimum 24 hours notice, and then 7 days notice for valuation and routine inspections. So just be aware of that for people that are talking to valuers, because if we need to get a valuer through a property and you've got a 14-day subject to finance clause on a sale, and it's going to be minimum 7 days plus postage to even get through and do that inspection, good luck on your 14 days.
Yeah,
That is a
that's
game
crazy.
changer.
And then OFI, other financial institutions, so broadening it up in terms of how you proceed your payments of rent. Got it.
Grounds of entry, Section 86.
Yeah, so that's the one with the prospective tenants. So prospective tenants going through open for inspection or private inspection and new sales as well. And that's the advertising photos and videos, that one. The other thing is, one more change to grounds of entry is we're going to be able to go through in the last 21 days of a tenancy, whereas at the moment we can only go through in the last 14 days, up to twice a week. So basically, if a tenant gives us notice of intention to vacate, they're 28 days, we're going to be able to go through 6 times over the last 21 days of their tenancy.
Yeah.
Whereas at the moment we can only go through in the last 14 days.
Okay.
So it's actually better.
All right.
Yeah.
It's an improvement.
Yeah.
All right, Section 211 talks about the matters to be considered by VCAP.
Yeah, depreciation's a fun one. Depreciation is taken into account at VCAT now. So basically you have a property with 8-year-old carpet, and when the tenant moves in, the carpet is absolutely immaculate. It's like it's never been stepped on. Tenant moves in, they move out 12 months later, carpet's trashed. You've got to remove it, you can't clean it, you've got to remove it and chuck it out. If you go to VCAT to try and claim that carpet, they'll look at it and say it's lived through its lifespan, therefore you get no value. So you get nothing for it. So they're actually writing that into the legislation. It's currently not covered, but it will be a after next year. The other thing is you look like you want to ask a question.
I didn't catch that.
So in other words, it's basically saying that even though it's trashed, you're still going to have to replace it, and you can't put that onus on the
Back
tenant.
on the tenant. Because you've already had the value of the asset for that period of time, and that's reached its effective lifespan.
Is everyone getting the message here about the value of a very good tenant?
Yes.
Who actually is house proud?
Correct.
If someone is house proud, and that also comes back to buying owner-occupier appeal property, doesn't it, Bryce? In terms of if you buy good property investments that are in good areas where you get potentially good tenants, it also rings true in terms of if they're in a location that has high status and a high appeal, and they want to live in that community, they want to have a good presented house and they'll take care of things, as opposed to some people who want to treat it like a university dormitory.
But the thing is that these things are being changed to make sure that people aren't marginalised, but they're going to get further marginalised by the fact that human nature is going to kick in and say, all right, well, let's, all things being equal, let's tenant profile who's our ideal tenant, and so the marginalised are going to get more marginalised.
It's going to be really hard for tenants to get property.
Yeah.
And if you're a
Good tenants who are highly
long-term
sought
tenant
after.
as well, that's interesting, right? Because you're going to be prejudged, unfortunately, under this. I'm just thinking aloud.
Wait till you get to that bit.
You know, they're going to be prejudged because
Yeah.
it's like, well, okay, you're a long-term tenant. You have no aspirations to own a home. I'm going to do some further digging on your story just to see how good you were in terms of, you know, whether you're a difficult tenant or whether you're a great tenant. Those are going to be part of the investigations that occur before they get an opportunity to rent. Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, here's a big one, which is section 91, reduced period of notice to vacate.
Yeah, so basically if you serve a notice to vacate on a tenant, so a 60-day notice or a 90-day end of fixed term notice on a tenant, and the tenant, or things like if a tenant's offered crisis accommodation or director of housing or anything like that, they can basically give you a 14-day notice to vacate irrespective of the end of lease date. So basically you serve a notice to vacate for the property being sold, you expect money or rent up until the date of settlement, which is the end of lease date for argument's sake. The tenant could give 14 days return notice at the start of that notice, so you would be without rent for say 45 days. So just be aware that once you serve that notice, basically they can move out in 14 days.
So then we move on to fixed term of 5 years or more. So let's talk through that, Hayley.
Yeah, so that's in now. So basically a renter can ask for a 5-year lease, or an owner can ask for it as well. If they both agree, we sign up to a 5-year fixed term lease. If we do a 5-year fixed term lease, we must use the correct form, which is now being produced by Consumer Affairs Victoria. If we don't use the correct lease agreement form...
So let me get this right.
Yep.
It's now being produced. It's legislated. It's currently...
No, it's in now. We can use
That's what
it.
I mean. It's in now. But have you got the form?
Yes, we do.
Because I thought the government were catching up on us.
No, we actually do have that form.
That's theirs.
Good question.
Well, amazing.
If you don't use the correct lease agreement, so you just use your one,
the
that your
standard,
agency one,
Yeah.
then the tenant can give 28 days notice to vacate at any period of time, with no break lease fees.
So I'm using that. I can do my increments like I do a commercial lease.
Yeah,
so
CPI or different
CPI,
methods.
4% or whatever it might be. Yep, okay. And is that what the tenant's looking for in terms of when they want a long-term lease? Are they looking for surety of what that's going to look like? Or in these 5-year leases, are we talking about incremental 12-month reviews? Or are the 12-month, do you have to state an increase?
You do need to state an increase.
Fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think many people are going to want it, to be honest with you. I don't think tenants will, and I don't think landlords will, because if you lock in for 5 years, what if you hate your neighbour, or you hate the house, or it doesn't suit your needs, or your kid goes to a different school and you're stuck there? I don't think many people will go for it.
This is what they wanted. Like the tenancy union, whatever they call themselves
now. I went on the radio against them a while ago,
and they said they didn't want it. So who wanted it?
I don't know.
Like, where does this stuff come from?
We actually agreed on that point. Who's going to want it? And they said the same thing. We don't think that's going to solve anything.
So now that you had this radio interview, so a quick sidebar in terms of what that looks like. What did they want when they're sort of voicing their opinions, and what did they get in the legislation?
I think they just wanted long-term, safe, secure housing, which in a lot of cases they've got with the 90-day end of fixed term notice and the removal of 120.
Yep.
So I think that's the biggest thing. Plus the pets was obviously a big one for them as well, and making
because
sure
they
the
got that,
properties
hence
are
the
maintained.
5 year didn't make sense then, right?
And how did they feel about the changes to the property without the owner's consent, those sorts of things?
They were pushing pretty hard for that as well. It's hard though. Like you speak to people and they say, "Oh, it didn't go far enough to helping renters," and then you speak. They're obviously people on renters.
Of course.
And then you speak to people who are property owners and they're really worried that renters have too many rights. So you're never going to keep everyone happy.
No,
At the,
walk a
at the
mile
end
in
of
each
the day.
other's shoes,
That's
and
it.
the answer's somewhere in the middle.
Yep, that's it. Absolutely.
Damage, danger, threats and intimidation and non-payment rent. We talked about those ones.
Yeah, so damage is a good one. They've changed the wording of it so it no longer includes the word malicious. So malicious was always a really hard one for us to get. So it's just written a lot better than it was. The other thing is if a tenant damages safety equipment such as smoke alarms, it's immediate notice to vacate. So it's going back to safety related stuff.
Okay, good.
Danger's a really good one. So danger at the moment only protects neighbouring premises. So if your tenant wants to kill the neighbour, then that's
Let's hope not.
protected.
Yep.
Let's hope not. Danger will actually include the owner, the agent, and any of our contractors and employees as well. So if they come into our office and
Cause a ruckus.
do something bad,
Yep.
then immediate notice to vacate. Threats and intimidation will be a 14-day notice to vacate. So that's where you've got tenants that, perhaps are very abusive on the phone or email or text message. Often you get long-winded text messages at 3 a.m. Threats and intimidation, 14-day notice to vacate. And that's purely for the owner, the agent, contractors and employees. So we pushed really hard for that.
Okay, so we had a win there.
So we had a win there. I've had situations in my career where I've felt like I was in danger for various reasons.
No doubt.
And I think that's a really good start.
I think it is a good win.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well done, nice one. So, and then that section also talks about the
Non-payment rent. This is the biggie.
So, this one is actually my interpretation of it, and it's very hard to understand exactly how it's going to play out. So, but basically, a tenant's going to be given a 5 strike in every 12-month period.
5 strikes.
5 strike policy.
Let's give them 10.
Not this week, Hayley. Not this month, Hayley. Not this month. What am I up to? What strike number? 4. Next one, you're out.
When's my anniversary
Here it
date?
is.
Yeah.
I'm cutting a cheque. It's on its way to you now.
So let's just say tenant's 14 days late with rent. Okay, so clear 14 days. On the 15th day, we serve a notice to vacate. They'll then have up until the termination that day in the notice to vacate, which is the sum of the postal period plus the notice period. So if you're serving via registered post, that's another 21 days. This is why I say go to electronics, it shortens your time period.
Yep.
But another 21 days to pay the rent.
So what does that mean for electronic? Just quickly, you're getting them DocuSigned.
Serving. Correct, yeah.
Serving
so you're
them
just
via
serving
their
electronically.
email addresses
you can
and so
email
forth.
it,
Yep. Okay.
So basically, you serve a notice to vacate, they've got another 21 days to pay the rent. If they pay the rent that's on that notice to vacate, it's 1 strike, you can't go to VCAP. Right? So they can do that 4 times in a 12-month period.
And then it's reset.
On the 5th time of a non-payment of rent in a rolling 12-month period, even if they pay the rent between the notice to vacate date and the termination date and the notice to vacate, that 21-day period, you can go before VCAP, but VCAP will decide whether they adjourn the hearing, put them on a payment plan, or give you possession.
It's right up there with getting out of the Australian cricket team back in the early 2000s, but it's very hard to get out.
Very hard to get out of the zone.
So what's the rolling 12 month? So
From the start of a lease for 12 months, then it resets again.
Okay. So coming back also to that serving period, because that is going to delay time if it's in the postal system.
Yeah.
So is that a very big tip that if you get an email address on their application, if you don't get an email address on the renter's application, the tenant's application, that's almost like a strike for me if you're looking after my property.
Yep.
In other words, if you're not going to give me any type of electronic communication in which I can talk to you, then I'm smelling a rat.
They can withdraw consent as well at any time, so
That's
even
okay.
if you have it in the lease agreement. But I completely agree. So
Yep.
we do everything electronically. We went completely paperless in 1 week.
Yep.
Because how do you sort of prove that they've received the other end? Hotmail, junk mail, all that sort of stuff?
You can get a read receipt.
Read receipt.
Other than that, it's actually not a basis of finding at VCAT that they actually received it. It's when the document was ready to be accessed. So you have to prove that the potential of it being, it's the same as Reggie Post. You post it via Reggie Post. They never collect it. The envelopes always come back to you. But the fact that you posted it is deemed that they've received it. They could have accessed it.
Yeah, but there's a slight difference.
There is, but,
Yeah.
but ultimately, if you set it up so it has a read receipt or at least a received, the received means it's ready for reading. Whether
Yeah.
the client did decide to open it.
Yeah, well, that's the key, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
you could have the best of intentions you've sent, you made a
Yep.
spelling mistake on the email address. At least
The
we're
other thing I
supposed to
do
get
is
to a house.
I take a photo of the notice with my phone and I text it to them. And I use that as well.
good idea.
So
Yep.
just as an extra backup, and
Yep.
I've actually used that at VCAP where I had a tenant say he never received it. And I said, how did you never receive it? I've got your response
Yeah,
here. And I
right.
use that and the member goes, yep, you received it. So yeah,
They
you
lose the
can do
colour
that
in
as
their
well.
face.
Because
Yeah.
I'm also thinking if it does get to VCAT, it's also a good indication that if they've said withdrawn themselves from all type of electronic communication, that in itself is an argument point that you can put your case forward once you do get to VCAT.
Correct.
Like they are professionally gaming
Yeah.
the system here.
And if you've got a real professional, do Reggie Post and just cop the extra couple of days
Yep.
and just be covered for it. Because if you've got a real professional that you know is going to try and get out of it,
Yep.
just cop the extra 5 days and
Okay.
just do it.
Good point.
Reggie Post.
Thank
Yep.
you.
What about prohibition on letting premises?
So yeah, if an owner serves a notice to vacate for demolition, premises used for business, occupied by landlord or family or sold, they can't let the property for 6 months from the date the notice was given, or go to VCAT to get the property cleared to be relet. So if an owner goes, oh, I need to get this tenant out, can't use my 120, can't use my 90 day, and they're not bad enough to get them out on a breach or anything else, don't serve a notice to vacate saying you're going to move in and then not move in and relet the property. The penalty unit fine on that one's gone up to 150, so that's 150 times $165.22, which is just under $25,000 fine.
You've heard it first here on the property couch. Don't
big
do that.
one.
Don't try and game the system.
Yeah.
Play by the rules, people.
The other tiny part to that is if we do serve a notice to vacate on a tenant, we will have to provide them with documentary evidence to support that notice to vacate. So, for example, for family member moving in, we'll need to get a stat deck from the landlord. We need to serve that with the notice to vacate. So it's closing that loophole. with
Yeah, don't
owners.
mess with the stat deck.
Yeah.
Fair.
So that's it.
All right. Okay. All right. Section 322 talks about the application for possession order.
Yeah, so with that one, 120-day no reason's been removed. The reason it's been removed is there's always a reason why you kick a tenant out. You're not going to say you're a perfect tenant, let's move you on. So they've recognised that and they've removed that from our availability,
From your arsenal.
unfortunately.
I like
Yes.
that little sad face.
I know,
Yeah,
I
right
do
at the
put a
bottom
sad
of your-
face on that form because I don't serve those ones a lot, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
because there's always, you know, you can usually use a legitimate reason, but there's those cases where you just haven't got the right section and you do that. So yeah, it's a tricky one.
In your career, what's the horror story that you've seen from a tenant? What's blown your hair back and thought, wow, that's something else.
Oh, there was one really early on in my career where when a tenant vacated, he unplugged the hot water unit. So basically, ground floor apartment, it just kept filling with hot water. So that was a good one. And he also got feces and wrote on the walls, I'm going to kill Hayley and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah.
that was really
That's
quite
encouraging. Yeah.
terrifying. And that was, I was in my 20s
No
when that
doubt.
happened. That was probably the worst I've had, where the police actually got involved and it became quite scary. But for the most part, we've actually had really, really good tenants. So I haven't had to deal with a lot of massive issues that other people have.
All right. Okay. All right. Section 411 talks about claim for rental bonds.
Yeah, so this goes across a couple of sections, so I'll just summarise it, it's easier. We're following New South Wales with this one. So basically when a tenant vacates property, they can apply for their bond back. Then if you don't dispute that bond claim within 14 days by applying to VCAT for the claim or getting tenant to sign off on the form or electronic, then the bond will automatically be returned to them. So at the moment we've got to finalise a bond within 10 business days and a lot of agents go over that period.
Yeah.
So hence why they've brought it in that a tenant can apply and it will automatically go back.
That's good news for you
Yeah.
guys, isn't it?
I think it's
What's-
great.
What's the
I-
percentage
That's
of
a
bonds that
win-win.
go sort of through Teflon
yeah.
coated, 90+%? Or?
Yeah, I actually think it's going to be fine. I know when they brought in New South Wales, they were really nervous about it, and they said it's just streamlined.
Oh, I think it's great.
They're barely at
You
VCAT
get your
now
money
for
to go and
bonds.
put
It's
something
just
else
done.
somewhere, on
Yeah.
another property. If you're moving to, it's a
Yeah.
very good, it's
I actually
sensible
love
policy.
what they've done to the bonds.
Yeah.
I think it'd be good.
Yep, bonds tick. Well done,
Tick.
team. Everyone who does other work.
That's got a smiley. That's got a smiley face.
Still work to be done. Work in progress.
All right, let's bring it home with this, Hayley. Section 439,
Yeah.
rental non-compliance register.
It's basically a public blacklist on landlords. So any landlord that fails to meet their obligations under the Act. So it's going to be around repairs and maintenance. The tenant reports repairs and maintenance, goes to VCAP. So there has to be a VCAT order and the owner's got a breach against them at VCAT. That will automatically get lodged with a non-compliance register, which means that it will be a searchable public register for anyone to look at. The other part of this is the agent will also be lodged along with the owner. So for property managers, my suggestion is if you are representing slum landlords now, move them on, you don't want them.
Yeah. And you know, it is also true that the unintended consequences here is if you do have a bad property manager and they are lazy in their responses, you will cover that, you'll be blacklisted, which sort of doesn't make sense to me. I think that one hasn't been thought through properly.
Yeah,
One's poor policy.
I think it needs some tweaking.
Yeah.
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 Well, Ben, I think we've got to say that Hayley's done a pretty good job of getting through I'll say this, a dry-ish sort of set of...
we only covered half, let's just put it that way, Bryce. And there's still 138 of them, so these are the highlighted ones.
Yeah. But I guess it just gives the intention, because as I said before, we had Hayley in the office here and some real value that she added to our team, and just those little nuances that you don't think of as a property investor, even if a lot of the people listening, they're tenants as well. So it helps them have a better understanding. So well done to you, 2 weeks.
Yeah, I agree. This for me is a great reference podcast. This is sort of one that you will always call back on. What were they talking about there? What was that? So listing all of those areas that we covered, this because this podcast is evergreen, so I promise you'll be referring back to this. It mightn't be easy to listen to it in one go, but ultimately it's going to be one of our best reference podcasts, so thank you.
And and thanks to Hayley, we said it before, she's going to make this downloadable, available on the proviso that she has a disclaimer that says this is her interpretation, not any sort of thing that you can 100% rely upon. So
Correct.
And it's still on track for 1 July 2020.
Unless
or earlier.
before,
Yes.
3 have already come in, so
Yep.
we're just waiting to see if they bring any more in, but I don't think anything else will necessarily come in before then.
And let's see how it rolls.
now, Hayley, last thing for me is before we let you go, personally, in terms of why are you investing in property yourself? You see the good, the bad, and the ugly. What's the vision? What are you and your family heading towards as a property investor?
I'm not actually worried about changes. I think for most part where everyone toes the line, it's great. The reason why we're investing in property is it's our retirement fund. So we've got properties in super, in a trust and also in personal. So it's a bit spread out. But it's our retirement for the future, and I don't think there's any better vehicle than property. My husband, when we first got together, he put money in shares and I put money in property, and I said, let's talk in 5 years. He didn't want to have that conversation after 5 years because he actually invested when it went, share market went down. And he's a full property advocate now. He absolutely loves it, and he's on board with all of our investment strategies as well. So I just don't think there's any better vehicle to have that independence at the end.
Here. I think you don't get any arguments from us. But again, thanks for stopping by the couch. That's been enormously beneficial, Ben, and I'm sure you'll agree.
Totally.
It's, total value add to our community. So thanks again. And we, as it gets a bit closer, Ben, we might even circle back and see.
Post 1 July, let's see what happened.
See what happens. But thanks again.
Thank you.
So my life hack today is from one of our listeners, Ben, Angela Stanley. Hi, Bryce and Ben. This one is short and sweet, but has always helped me with my discretionary spending, Ben. I don't know where I heard it first, but I have always remembered it. It's not a bargain unless you need it.
Ooh, I like it.
Let it land.
Yeah, it's good,
Got some
isn't it?
power in that, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's good.
Oh, but I bought it because it was such a bargain. But yeah, did you need it? Or just did you want it?
Yes, love it.
So I like that, Angela. She puts, thanks for putting on a great podcast. I'm a very late starter and I only discovered it a few months ago, so I'm slowly catching up, but still enjoying the journey. Thanks again, Angela Stanley. Well, there's a few resources for you to help
Angela,
catch up, isn't there, Ivor? So you can go and download our binge guide. There are heaps and heaps of resources to help you. And if you are new to our podcast and you've made it this far, we used to say this all the time, Ben. We haven't said it for a little while. A couple of things. It's always tough to jump into a journey when we're up to episode 248 and you think, where do I start?
Yep.
We thoroughly recommend that you listen to the first 20 because they are foundational for everything we talk about. The little life hack here is you can do it at 1.5 speed, Ivis, so you can catch up really quickly. And of course, you can download the binge guide so that you can catch up where we've summarised the first 20 episodes so that you can really fast track your learning because we want to make sure people come up to speed really, really quickly. Ben, did you know?
Did you know, Bryce? Well, just because, I'm just going to try and stretch it out over a couple of podcasts because I can't come up with any new ideas. So come on, community, give me more ideas. I'm only joking.
You're not really.
No, I had this idea, right, where I was going to do Australia versus the rest of the world, but I'm just going to break it up into two because it just hit me. I thought, well, I can get 2 podcasts out. So did you know we're talking about roads today, Bryce?
Okay, all right.
Roads.
No.
So here
Road
we
scholars.
are. So we'll go world first, right? So the longest highway in the world is where, Bryce? And I'm not giving him the show notes this time. So
The longest highway in the world is in... It'd have to be America, wouldn't it?
Oh, good guess. No, bad luck, Ivis. So she said Dubai for those of you who can't hear her under her voice. Pan American Highway, Bryce, is 48,000 kilometres of road. 48,000 kilometres of highway, the longest highway.
Can I test you? Did you know?
Yeah, do that.
Where's A and where's B? Where do you start on the Pan American Highway and where do you end up?
I think it's a round circle. Just connects itself. It's a bit like the Pacific Highway in Australia, right?
Well played. Well played.
Just a guess. I just thought maybe let that one go through the keeper. Okay, now the longest street in the world, Bryce. The longest street. Now this is under a little bit of debate, but it's pronounced. Well, I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's Yonge. It's Yonge. Yonge. Okay, Yonge Street in Canada. Now, what's debated about this was because everyone thought that it actually connects into a highway, right? But the reality is that street from the bay up to one of the lakes is 56 kilometres.
All right.
So that's Canada has the longest street. Now, what about the longest straight road in the world? The longest straight road in the world.
What's the difference between the street and the road?
Well, no, so the highway, longest road, bitch was the highway, right? So the Pan American Highway.
Yeah.
And then the longest street. Well, street, you want build up, right? You want a proper, residential sort of, that's the longest street, right?
There's the distinguisher.
But the longest dead straight road in the world, Bryce, is where? Just get in the car and travel.
That's why I went America a bit before, because you think of all Europe and they'd have to go through different countries and that'd be hard. Yeah. So from left to right, so I'll go...
So this one's basically setting the Tesla, right?
Yeah.
And just for 260 kilometres, you are not going to move your steering wheel. Where is the longest straight bit of road?
Where?
Austria.
Austria.
Do you know how the topography of Australia, Iris?
Yeah.
Well, she's trying to join in. Why don't you just speak?
One day.
Let the community know one day.
250.
It's not, but I'm going to do Australia next week. So that's where I'm stretching it out.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'll close the loop.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do the longest roads in the world. We're moving on. Okay. So the longest straight road in the world is in Saudi Arabia. And it's 260 kilometres and it's Highway 85. Check it out. One straight bit of road that just goes through the sand, right? So there you go. And so next week's episode, Bryson, did you know? I'm going to do Australia's longest highway. I might give you 3, in fact. And I'm also going to give you Australia's longest main street. And I'm also going to give you Australia's longest straight road.
All right.
Okay, so do your homework, people.
See if you can play along at home.
Share with you that next week on our 249th.
249. Now, Ben, we're just going to tie a little bit of housekeeping here.
Yeah, what have I done?
Circle road that you talked about before.
Yeah, no good?
No, not even close to a circle. So it starts in Prudhoe Bay in Alaska.
Thank you.
You knew this, didn't you? And it ends up in Ushuaia. Oh, now I'm starting to sound like you. In Argentina.
The Pan America. So it goes not only through North America but down into South America.
Yeah.
There you go. So it goes through countries, Bryce.
But if you print out the map, Iris, and you spin it a couple of times fast enough, it will look like a circle.
Yeah. No. So there you go. It's not like the Pacific Highway in Australia, which is Highway number 1. If for those of you in Australia.
Yeah. Well done.
Right. Okay. So there you go. But I didn't know that. I just searched longest road in the world, Iris, and it came up.
Good research.
I didn't
mate.
actually then put it on a map. All right, there we go.
That wasn't me.
Okay,
So,
knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it. Thanks you, Imus, for wrapping me up.
Well said. See you next week, folks. Hey there, folks. Bryce Holdaway here. Before you go, if you're new to our community and only listened to maybe a handful of episodes, I thoroughly recommend that you go all the way back to episode number 1, where we unpack all of the foundations when it comes to property investing. Now, for those of you that might be a little bit time poor, I've got good news for you. We have a binge guide that you can download straight away, which summarises the first 20 episodes where Ben and I unpack the foundational pillars of the A, B, C, D, and so much more. And you can get that straight away. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20, you can download it and consume it whenever you want. It's completely free and available now. And for those of you, just a quick reminder that nothing we've spoken about today constitutes financial advice. We recommend that you reach out to your licensed professional advisor so that you can look at your unique circumstances before acting on any information. Now don't forget, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20 and get your binge guide today.